Hello, I am the Awkward GM Corbin, and today I have friend of the channel, Travis. Travis, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Travis Legg. My pronouns are he and they. When I'm not running games on the Onyx Path Twitch or on my own Twitch over at Plastic Age Plays, I am writing them. I do freelance work for Onyx Path, done some work for Renegade, some work for Dirty Vortex, a couple other companies. And then I am the owner and operator of Aegis Studios, who publish various games. Most of them are Savage Worlds, and most recently, we are working on the Bizarre Kingdoms expansion for Odysseys and Overlords, which is a fantasy setting using Savage Worlds.
So let's dive right in. What is Bizarre Kingdoms exactly? I've read the Kickstarter page. I only know a little bit. What can you tell the audience?
So, Bizarre Kingdoms is an expansion to the setting of Odysseys and Overlords. Odysseys and Overlords, the very, very, very brief version is it is a fantasy setting in which about 1,000 years ago there was a grand schism between the gods, and that schism ended in a truce between Ragnar, the god of war, and Chandra, the goddess of the moon. And the two of them decided they were going to have a ceasefire. They would not get directly involved in the affairs of mortals anymore, but they would still, of course, have priests and followers and such. There were some things that wound up uh, happening as a result of this. New lines were drawn for different nations, and there's a central swath of the continent of Pangea, sort of the main continent where the action generally happens in Odysseys and Overlords, called the Untamed Gauntlet, which is still full of ruins from before the schism, still has treasures hiding out, still has all sorts of stuff, and of course, a bunch of monsters have moved in as well. So it gives you
Yeah.
kind of your standard fantasy idea of like dungeons to go and explore. Um, there is a nation on Pangea called Chandra's Haven. It is a theocracy, and they basically have claimed divine right over the Untamed Gauntlet.
Mhm.
So you're expected to basically get what's called a writ of salvage from the government there, and basically pay a tithe on all of the treasure that you get. So that's kind of the very, 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 very bird's
Broads.
eye view of the setting. It gets way more complicated than that, but that's the bird's eye view. And then, of course, it uses the Savage World system, which is famously used with, Deadlands, Savage Pathfinder, Savage Rifts,
Yeah.
the East Texas University, all these fucking
Yeah.
awesome games.
I'm
And
I'm not very familiar with Savage World, so like what makes it ideal for this type of setting? Like what's it like?
oh well, honestly, like the Savage Worlds, like the core rules are very cool. They're very fast. They're very fun. It's basically you have attributes and skills which are determined. Your degree of mastery is determined by a die type, right?
Oh, okay.
So as you get better at something, your die type increases, and
Okay.
then player characters and special NPCs called wild cards. So like your bosses, people that are more important, big monsters, things like that, have what's called a wild die. So, hey, Zug, my cat is just a diva. Um,
No
but uh,
worries.
but yeah, so you roll your skill die and then your wild die.
Mhm.
Wild die gets rolled with everything you roll.
Mhm.
You're looking at target number four, and basically it's a pass fail, and then it
Mhm.
gets into some various permutations about you know you can bolt on things, like you can add hit location if you want, you can add critical charts if you want.
Okay.
There are fear tables, so it's very on that smooth slick engine. You
Yeah.
can add a lot of things you can dial in,
Yeah.
and the Savage Worlds Fantasy Companion really did a lot of the heavy lifting for us for
Hmm.
making sure the setting worked. So when we did the Odysseys and Overlords core book, we really got to focus on like what makes this setting unique. We really had to focus on the new ancestries, the various different playable peoples, We had to focus in on introducing some new types of magic,
Mhm.
and introducing some new rules around divine magic. The idea that player characters, inspired kind of by the like old gold box set D&D, the Immortals rules. Player characters in Odysseys and Overlords can theoretically become gods. There's like a path
Nice.
to apotheosis if you want that in your campaign. You certainly don't have to do it, but there's a way that you can get there,
Okay.
um,
Is
which is cool.
if so with Bizarre Kingdoms, do I need to have Odysseys and Overlords in order to play the game?
So you don't necessarily need Odysseys and Overlords. The way that Bizarre Kingdoms is set up is it is very much an expansion on that setting. And the reason it's called Bizarre Kingdoms is because it introduces four new kingdoms that have been kind of hinted at or discussed a little bit in the Odysseys and Overlords core book, but they're really not detailed. Which are the Collective, which is a island nation to the north of Pangea that is peopled by changelings, and it talks about the doppelgangers. And it talks
Yeah.
about their various agendas and their plans and their religion, their philosophy. It's a very, very cool chapter written by Jam DeFoggy. There's Quellen, which is a nation on the southern continent, which was hinted at in some first edition material, but we really delve deep into its history, into the motivations behind why it was created, the new playable options that are native to that continent, and we talk a lot about that nation is run by a very old creature called Reyna, who is a sphinx, and she values knowledge kind of above all else. And so we delve a lot into like why that is and how that has shaped that nation. Um, and then we have two undersea kingdoms. We have the Commonwealth of the Undercurrent, which is kind of a magicratic republic, I guess, right? Like
Yeah.
magic has a lot of sway there. People do have a lot of the freedoms and rights that you would expect from a functioning society. It's
Yeah.
designed to be to look at first glance like a utopia, but there are some very oppressive, as any utopia doesn't quite live up to it. So there are things that are challenges for people from there. But that's also the land of origin of the Ligonians, who were one of the ancestries introduced in the Odysseys and Overlords book. And then lastly, we have the Brine Blood Empire, and they are an expansionist imperial undersea empire of this species called the Ngenki, which are basically like mermaid octopi. So like a species of Ursulas
Nice.
that
That's
are
awesome.
martial and angry and want to take the world over. And really, the big thing that has kept them from taking the world over is that they can't be outside of the water for very long. They can survive about an hour outside of the water. So they desperately want the magic that the Commonwealth uses to allow them to just breathe air.
Oh yeah. I that's
So
the first time I've ever heard someone taking the Ursula character type of like octopus like legs and actually running with it. Like every time
yeah,
you hear mermaids, you never hear about the octopus mermaids.
yeah, I think it's super cool. And in fact, they have like one of their abilities is that because they have those extra limbs, they can like take an extra attack, or they can like snatch you up and then beat you silly because they've got you grappled with four of their tentacles,
Mhm.
leaving their hands totally free. Things like
Awesome.
that. But the to get back to the original question, you can absolutely take those four kingdoms as they are presented in this book
Mhm.
and drop them into your Swayed fantasy game. It doesn't have to be Odysseys and Overlords. You could
Mhm.
drop them into a Savage Pathfinder game. It would just run. There's no reason not to. You could drop it into a Savage Rifts game. You'd probably have
Yeah.
to make some tweaks, but you could.
Yeah.
Anything that Savage Worlds compatible, this book will work with. Now, having said that, we have add-ons on the Kickstarter. So like you can pay an extra $5, I think it is, and get the Odysseys and Overlords second edition core book added on.
Awesome.
So if you're new to the setting, you can get all those things, everything that we've published so far. We have several adventures that we did for second edition. We also have all the first edition stuff. First edition of Odysseys and Overlords was in basic fantasy, so like a retro clone first edition D&D, basically using
Okay.
the OGL. OGL thing happened. You can Google
Yeah,
it. I'm not going to get into it.
I
But
gotcha.
when that happened, I was like, oh well, I'm never going to do that again. And I'm softening on that maybe, but I was like, I'm not fucking with the OGL anymore. Like I'm just not doing it. So I swapped development for Savage Worlds over or for Odyssey and Overlords over to Savage Worlds, but I did it in such a way that if you all of the information that you would need to convert the first edition materials is in the Odysseys and Overlords core book. So, like,
Okay,
if you have the Odysseys and Overlords core book, your Savage Worlds rules, and all the first edition materials, you can run the first edition materials right out of the box.
awesome.
So, because it just tells you what traits to use and what difficulties instead, and how traps work instead, and how to replace things. It's very very robust conversion.
That's
Um,
that's good. Is so how much like are there so is this like a DM's book specifically, or are there like player options and things in there as well?
there are player options in there. I would say if you are looking, like everything that's in that book, conceivably could be playable. Like
Yeah.
Ligonians are absolutely a playable species
Mhm.
in the Odyssey of Nova's core book. One of the things that I had in mind was if we get to a point where we can get to stretch goals, is adding a couple of the things that are not yet in there as as a
Mhm.
playable ancestry,
Okay.
namely the Genki and the doppelgangers. They're not presented as a playable ancestry, so
Okay.
there's some mention in the Odysseys and Overlords book
Mhm.
about how you would do a doppelganger, sort of quick and dirty.
Yeah.
But I would like to do like an official release for
So
that. So we'll see how that goes.
so for Bizarre Kingdoms, what character options are there? Or is it
Oh, there's a lot. So
yeah.
you've got the principal playable options that are introduced are mostly introduced in the Quellen chapter. So you have the Fleetfoot, which are uh, one of the playable options in Odysseys and Overlords on the main continent is centaurs. They're
Mhm.
a base ancestry because I love centaurs. I think they're awesome. So we have a offshoot, like a cousin to the centaur, called the Fleetfoot that are indigenous to Quellen, and they have the lower body of a gazelle
Oh,
rather than a horse. So they're just freaky fast, basically.
awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty neat. We have hyena folk, which are a very specific type of. There's a broad general ancestry called wild folk, which are basically like because one of the setting conceits is that sometime in the ancient times before the schism, animals were more sentient than they are now. They
Yeah.
weren't fully human, but they were self aware,
Okay.
and so humanity and these self-aware animals would have children, and one of the gods was very very mad about that, which is one of the reasons why the schism started,
Mhm.
and struck all the animals dumb and all this stuff. So the wild folk are those who are descended from that.
Okay.
uh, the hyena folk that are introduced in here are like a specific offshoot of wild folk
Mhm.
that are variated enough that they merit their own. Technically, the Ligonians are an offshoot of wild folk as well, which
Mhm.
and they're undersea people. So, and then we have the insectoids, and there are two insectoid ancestries that we introduce. One is called the jeweled beetle.
Mhm.
They are more tanky, I guess, to
Mhm.
put a fine point on it. Uh, they are very interested in relics of the past. They have history is culturally very important to them, so they've really kind of bonded well with Reina and with the government that Reina has built in Quellen. And then you have the poison tails, and they are more aggressive. And
I'm guessing scorpion like?
they're scorpion-like, yeah, but more almost like a cross between a scorpion and like a armadillo almost.
That sounds very tanky. That sounds very
Yeah,
armored.
yeah, they're not as tough as the jeweled beetles are,
Okay.
but they're just more like in shape. Like they have like a wider. maybe armadillo is not the best. They have like a wider upper body,
Yeah.
and there is they do have chitinous armor. It's just not as thick as that of a jewel beetle.
And so those are the five ancestries that you've got in there.
Yeah, well, we've got the four ancestries. Yeah,
Oh, oh,
the
four.
Fleetfoot, Hyena Folk,
Yeah.
Jeweled Beetle, and Poison Tail.
So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the table of contents here while I'm talking to you, and I saw insectoids of Quellan, and I was like, oh, the jeweled beetle and the poison tail and the insectoids. I'm like, oh no, they're all under the same category.
Right. Yeah. And then there are some additional, there's a lot of like creatures and one-off things that are introduced mostly for the GM to use, but turning one of these into a playable ancestry wouldn't be a lot of work. And
What
there are some too that are also just straight up like uh you know there are a lot of npcs instead of there are creatures in this book for sure, but there are also just npcs.
yeah.
you know,
It's nice to it's nice to see that you have a wide selection of creatures and like this history for all these kingdoms. What are some of your antagonists that you might want to show off or showcase?
sure. So everybody's kind of got them.
Yeah.
There's the Brian Blood Empire section in particular, kind of has like a list of all of the higher ups in the empire, in
Mhm.
the empire's military structure, and which ones are loyal to the empress and which ones are a threat to the empress. So there's a lot of like that political intrigue is built into the NPCs that are provided there.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so you can really like set it up where people may maybe if your group wants to try to stage a coup, you have that. But then there's also you know uh more, I guess, Cthulhu like creatures. There's one creature in here that is described more like a location. They
Nice.
don't really have traits so much as like difficulties that you have to overcome when you go near where they're at,
Hmm.
because they are so massive and so uh, just incredible in size.
What are those
Um,
called?
the Deep That Devours.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
crazy.
and then we have things like the Ticklick, which again, that would be another thing that I would look at possibly making a playable breakout for it. There's rules in here for how to use them in what is provided, how to sort of piece them together with what's provided in the Swade Fantasy Companion.
Mhm.
But I would like to break out a more like direct, full version of it. And part of the reason why we don't have those is because this book was entirely writers for hire. We had word count limitations, and that's why some of these are like, yeah, the Ticklick, you can use the insectoid ancestry that's in the Swade Fantasy Companion, but you add an X trait and remove X trait and so on and so forth. That's an option, but I would love to be able to, if we can unlock the stretch goals, uh, you know, knock out some of those things so they'd be more direct and more clear and more personalized.
Yeah,
You know,
I getcha. It's a with the with this sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second.
no worries.
So what so like you built this setting from the ground up. What type of what has influenced you in creating this? Like where do you get your inspiration from?
So my initially when I was looking at it, I was like, I want to make something that's kind of like a cross between Mystara and Scarlet Lands, right?
Hmm.
Those were kind of like my instant. Those were the base influence because I love Mystara. It's just super cool and weird. And I absolutely love the Scarlet Lands. There's no, I don't think there's any secret there. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I was like, these are cool ideas. Let's see if we can get some of this chocolate and this peanut butter and see how it tastes. And then at the time, I had been streaming with Roll for Seduction over on Twitch, and I absolutely love the cast over there. I adore them. We're going to be, I'm not sure when this is airing, but we're going to be streaming tomorrow. On Thursday, the 11th.
11th, yeah.
I'm going to be streaming an actual play with them of this, which will be great. Because like right when I first did the player's guide, we started doing an actual play. And then through that actual play, we defined a whole bunch of the stuff about the world. We changed a bunch of rules. We built sort of the invisible edition that never came out, which
Ooh,
is another thing that's interesting about. Yeah, because like we were working with that OGL base.
yeah.
And when I did Odyssey and Overlord second edition, we had built out and come up with a complete set of rules for second edition that was based off of the OGL. And we had done some things I was very proud of in that. We had tweaked out, we did a variation on feats called flares that worked a little differently. We basically yoinked the action economy from Pathfinder second edition. It's the only thing about Pathfinder second edition that I like personally. I hate doing math.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
so we had sort of cobbled together this system I was really proud of, but then the OGL thing happened. And so I liken it to that scene in Superman 2 when he gets turned evil and he straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Hmm.
And so that dude that's selling knickknacks of Leaning Tower of Pisa has to change all of his sculptures.
Oh,
And then at
no.
the end of the movie, when Superman's not evil anymore, he goes back and makes the Leaning Tower lean again. And this dude like just smashes all of his freshly remade shit with a broom. Yeah, I call it the Pisa problem. So that's what it was like. It was like the Pisa problem. So I was very frustrated by that, but fortunately, my company has a Scarred Lands. Woo! There's a Freudian slip. My company has a Savage Worlds license.
Yeah.
So Age of Studios can make Savage Worlds content. We're a part of their ACES program.
Hmm.
Um, and I have two other full settings that we have for Savage Worlds. And then I've also done like a couple of one sheets. They call them, where it's just like a little premise, a couple extra rules, and you're good to go. The one that springs to mind for that is Toxic Mutant Zombie Mayhem, which is like my love letter to like the Return of the Living Dead, like splatter
Oh,
gore zombie movies. Um,
okay.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that one's like 2 pages long or something like that. It's not much. And then we have the Contagion Savage Adventures, which is actually the first role playing game I ever made, but we now adapted to Savage Worlds, and that's like a modern urban fantasy. The gods are real. They have made themselves known. Monsters have made themselves known. Half the planet doesn't believe it because half the planet doesn't believe reality.
Yeah.
So
Too
so that's
close
that.
to home.
That's that setting. Yeah, basically, a lot of people are in denial about it. And then the other setting I have for Savage Worlds is called Citizens Divided. Um, it takes place after a civil war in 2060, and but it's basically the have-nots rise up and like fight the 1% and make them redistribute wealth, not to a great amount. It breaks out. I think the breakdown we give in the core book is that now about 94% of the people, control 1% of the wealth, as opposed to 99% of the people or whatever. Like it's
Yeah.
it's slightly better, but not real. Like they didn't get what they should have gotten from it. And so it's post-apocalyptic. It's cyberpunk. And it has all those trappings and tropes, but it's also a lot of political commentary about, you got to stop letting rich old white people run the country.
Yeah. I feel that a lot, man.
So
I'll have
yeah,
to check that out after this.
I appreciate it. It's a lot. I had a lot of fun with it. There's an adventure for it called Election Night that I had a really good time writing.
Man.
Because
Now,
my big inspiration for the setting, I had two inspirations. One, I wanted to make sure I did a cyberpunk thing where there were mechs in it.
hmm
So like there's kaiju fighting mecha, but there's personal mechs in it.
hmm.
And two, I absolutely adore the movie Strange Days, and I wanted to like catch that vibe.
I haven't heard that movie. Strange
Strange
Days.
Days, oh, it's so good. Yeah, it's Ray Fiennes and Angela Bassett, and Juliette Lewis. So like
Ooh.
one of the things in Strange Days, he does there's this sensory, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head now, but there's this sensory thing you wear. It's like BTLs in Shadowrun, basically.
Yeah.
So we have like a whole culture built around that, and Citizens Divided and whatnot.
Okay. That's awesome. I have so many things to check out after this interview now. Going
Please do.
going back to Bizarre Kingdoms, like what's
Oh, by
like
the way, all those things are available as add-ons on the Bizarre Kingdoms Kickstarter. By the way, if you want to
oh
save a few bucks, you can pick them up as add-ons,
oh
and
that's good to know.
everything that's digitally available, you will get right away. Like as soon as payments clear, I start sending out coupons
Okay. I'll have to check that out then, definitely. Uh
for sure.
so with the like going back to Bizarre Kingdoms, like we covered it's part of your setting of Odysseys and Overlords. What exactly is like the origin of this like region itself? I think you might have touched on it a little bit. Is there
Well, I
anything
mean, it's like all the world that hasn't been covered yet. Well, it's most of the world that hasn't been covered.
oh, okay.
So the two oceans, and then the northern island and the southern continent.
And what makes these kingdoms bizarre than the other kingdoms that are already pre-existing?
Well, everything that's been introduced so far is, with few exceptions,
Hmm.
is run by humanoids. So out of the continents, out of the countries on Pangea, the only ones that aren't really run by humans mostly, but by humanoids more broadly, are the Giant Home, which, as you might guess, is run by giants,
Yeah.
and the Shard, which is a nation under the absolute rule of a monarch by the name of Lady Moldovino, who is a 900-year-old vampire. And it's
Hmm.
basically where, like, it's the vampire kingdom.
Gotcha.
The living people who live in the Shard pay a blood tithe to live there. It's
Man.
yeah, it's Ravenloft on crack. You know what I mean? Ravenloft dialed up to 11 is really what it's about. But she also uses various other monsters, like she has what are called Empyrean Conquerors, which are her kobold special forces who are trained to fight on wyvern backs. She has an army of gargoyles at her disposal, shit like that. It's a cool horror setting within, and of course, every country that shares a border with the Shard is constantly terrified of war with them.
So if you were to take the kingdoms down from this book, does each one sort of play with different themes, you'd say?
Definitely, yeah. The collective is all about intrigue and, not only courtly intrigue, but like religious or philosophical intrigue,
Hmm.
because there's a component of their society called, I guess, a component of their society. It's a little hard to soundbite it, but they have an object that they call the God Riddle.
Hmm.
They believe the God Riddle is a piece of Ember, the god of knowledge, who was killed in the schism. What they want to do with it, there are different factions among the collective that want to do different things with the God Riddle, or think that the God Riddle means different things. Some people think it should be reassembled. They should find every piece of Ember, put her back together. Others think that it should be kept apart. Others think that it should be twisted to their own ends as a weapon. So there's kind of this level of intrigue going on. Meanwhile, the collective has its fingers in everybody else's political pies, because it's really easy for them to do so. You know, they can go in and replace people.
Yeah.
Um,
You said they're changelings and doppelgangers, so they
yeah,
can like change fate.
yeah, the official term is doppelganger, but yeah, they can look like somebody else.
So it's not like Fae. They're more
No,
okay. Good.
no, they're
I
closer to Odo than.
oh, oh yeah. I was getting
Yeah.
that feeling. I was like, oh, you call it the collective. That sounds very similar to what was it?
Yeah,
The great. Well, I forget what it was.
the Great Link.
The Great Link. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's definitely a whole lot of like regular old D&D changeling slash doppelganger in there, but there's also some DS9 influence, I'm sure, has
Uh,
worked its way in there over the years. I'm a huge Trekkie; it'd be hard for it not to.
yeah.
So,
And with the political intrigue you have, it makes sense.
right, right. And then, so that's kind of the vibe of the collective. Quellen is all about the archaeology, the fantasy archaeology,
Yeah.
right? It's not about I'm going to go with, Mike with a little duster and a magnifying glass. It's Indiana Jones. I'm going to run around with a bullwhip, springing traps and finding cool shit, because that's the type of it's about scholarship and knowledge and history, but it's all about the action of getting your hands on that. So that's kind of the feel and the vibe of Quellen. And then also sort of the mysterious continent beyond the country where everything is, it's home of the insectoids. It's the desert that, a lot of people don't go to because it's dangerous,
Yeah.
but it's full of like pre-schism artifacts as well, because very few people go there. So you got that sort of adventure archaeology vibes in Quellen. The Commonwealth of the Undercurrent is, again, I think probably the closest thing to like a political statement about where we are in the Western world. It's about a place that on its face you can say, "Oh, that's a utopia. Everything's great there." But as you scratch away at the surface, you're like, no, that's not so great.
Yeah.
That could
Yeah.
use some fixing. So that's the Commonwealth. And then the big difference between the Commonwealth and the Brian Blood Empire is the Commonwealth is kind of as we are and or as we would like to think of ourselves.
Mhm.
And the Brian Blood Empire is like a worst case scenario, right? This imperial,
Mhm.
grind you under the boot heel, supremacist power.
Is it?
And so they're very much there to resist.
Mhm.
The Commonwealth is there to either hail from or to go in and try to like correct the society and try to do your best to change those systems.
Mhm.
The Brian Blood Empire is to be fought or to
Yeah.
escape from. They're
Or
not
rebel or what
rebel
have.
against. Yeah,
Yeah.
like if you're gonna let people play Genkis at your table, awesome. But you should probably have them be Genki like refugees who are like trying to leave, because the Brian Blood Empire has very ugly beliefs. They and they all and there's a lot of explanation into why the Empress is the way that she is.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is like trauma that she experienced as she was a child, that has made her into this hardened monster. But that doesn't change the fact that she's a hardened monster. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she's a mildly sympathetic hardened monster. And yeah, she feels that she needs to rule the world because nobody else is capable of doing so properly. And anybody who stands in her way is chum.
Yeah. That makes sense. So these two nations are both underwater, so it makes sense that they'd be at odds with one another.
Absolutely. Yeah, they
Yeah.
are sworn enemies. And it makes it worse because the Commonwealth has and frequently uses magic that allows Ligonians to go to the surface.
Hmm.
You can get basically, if you create a Ligonian character in Odysseys and Overlords, you start out with an amulet of air breathing. And
Hmm.
this amulet lets you breathe air normally rather than having only being able to survive for an hour outside of the water. But it also magically taxes you. So
Hmm.
like when you have income, 10% of what you get is magically teleported to the wizard who made your amulet, which is part of how the economy of the Commonwealth works. And also part of why the Commonwealth guards that magic so jealously.
Yeah.
Um, right. And so there is an element of, yeah, we don't want the Brian Blood Empire to get a hold of that magic because then they will run roughshod over the surface.
Hmm.
That's true. But a bigger element is we also don't want to lose our profits because again, this pseudo utopia, the Commonwealth, it's a magocracy and a republic, but it's also capitalist, highly
Yeah.
capitalist.
Yeah,
And
you
that's the
can
problem.
you can sell magical weapons to the or magical amulets like these to the Blood Brine Empire or something, but you're not going to be able to make money if everyone else is taken out because of
Right,
it.
exactly. Exactly.
That makes sense. That
Yeah,
man.
and Simon K wrote both of those chapters and did a really good job of talking about the common ground from which they emerged, which is cool. Because at one point there was kind of a league of undersea nations, and then
Mhm.
an incident happened, and that caused it to sort of break off. One side was Brian Blood, one side was Commonwealth,
Okay.
and because it was all under one writer's sort of oversight, Simon was really able to run some very cool threads between the two, and just make it a really rich, believable, ecosystem, a connection of nations, a believable interaction, I guess you might say.
That's awesome. Who else is working on this project as well? If you want to give some shout outs.
So yeah, we had Jam DeFoggy, who actually runs. If you go over to the Savage, to the Peg Inc. Twitch channel, Jam runs the Savage Universe Twitch talk shows. So he brings on aces such as myself, sometimes people from Pinnacle, sometimes even community content creators, and talks with them about their upcoming stuff. But he's also a very, very talented writer. He wrote The Collective. Rachel
Nice.
Savicki, who actually wrote, if I recall properly, wrote The Shard, like came up with like I had a idea. I was like, I want a vampire queen,
Mhm.
make a nation for me. And so Rachel did that for first edition. She's back now, and she did the Quellen chapter beautifully. Um, and then Simon K, who you and I worked with on
Oh yeah.
Bloody Burrows. Simon is a good friend. Simon's just kind of getting started writing, but I've had the opportunity to work with him, like I said, on Bloody Burrows and on a couple other projects, and I've been able to kind of see behind the scenes. All right, yeah, let's do it. I think you've got the stuff, you've got the chops. And when I said, do you think you can take on this big of an assignment? He was down for it. So we did it. And it was kind of a developmental decision on my part. I wanted to have the same author doing the Brian Blood Empire and the Commonwealth, so that they would have that interconnectivity.
That's everyone who worked on the project.
And as everyone who worked on the project, yeah,
Oh,
three
and you
authors and myself.
oh, and you
And
got the wonderful cover art too.
yeah, I mean, and most of the art in this book is by Dean Spencer, who I've been using for Odysseys and Overlords since Odyssey and Overlords first edition. I commissioned a cover from Dean for the second edition book, which is super cool. I'm super proud of that cover. Fun fact: the Odysseys and Overlords second edition cover, the characters on that cover are the characters from the Roll for Seduction stream. Like we
Oh,
sent Dean pictures of the players, and we're like, "This is what they need to look like." Um, and so that's how we wound up with that cover art. And so yeah, I used a bunch of Dean's art in this because Dean has pretty well defined the look of the setting. And there are probably 15 or so drawings that came from elsewhere, many of them from either Adobe stock or Purple
mm,
Duck Games.
yeah. Awesome. I I like
Thank you.
collaboration in this, and you're like, just to say from my own personal experience, you've been an awesome developer to work under
Thank
this.
you. I try to make it. This is supposed to be fun.
Oh yeah,
We're making elf games. When it stops being fun, stop fucking doing it.
and do the work. Have your job be something that you love to do,
Yeah,
and yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the places where I'm very fortunate. And um, I was in a position where I could afford to take a bit of a risk, so I hired these authors to work on this book. And that's what the aim of the Kickstarter is for, is to sort of recoup the cost of hiring the authors. This is the first. I've done other books for Odysseys and Overlords in first edition that I hired somebody to write. Um, but even those, I was working mainly with a royalty split,
yeah,
where they would just get, like, I don't know. I think it was 60% of the royalty or something like that. It was
yeah.
an absurd amount. I took a very, very, very tiny chunk. Because I was more interested in making the money, uh, getting the money part off of selling just actual copies of the core book, right? So the Gazetteer is entirely work for hire, but it was entirely done on like a royalty basis. This is the first one where I've really been like, here's a word count, pay like a straight contract. And they also
Mhm.
do still get royalties on them too, because I believe that you should try to do that if you can. Try
Agreed.
to give people a bit of a tail on their work. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about Bizarre Kingdoms and that hasn't been said already?
Just that the book, I'm very proud of this book. I think it's got great utility for anybody who, obviously, if you play Odysseys and Overlords, yes, it's going to be awesome for you. If you just like fantasy gaming and are into Savage Worlds, it's going to be great for you. If you've not yet checked out Savage Worlds, it's a very solid introduction setting. But you will need to go pick up the Savage Worlds core rules, which I cannot have on my Kickstarter because I'm not pinnacle
Yeah.
entertainment. But you can go pick that up and delve into a world of fun. We also have add-ons out the wazoo on here. Everything that I've ever published for Savage Worlds is available as an add-on in one way or another. So you can get the Contagion Savage Edition in PDF or POD as an add-on. You can get Citizens Divided in PDF or POD as an add-on.
Mhm.
You can pick up. I have a package of just generic fantasy adventures I made that you can get as an add-on that easily drop into Odysseys and Overlords, but into just about any other fantasy setting as well, because they're made to be sort of setting neutral.
Definitely checking those out because you've sold me on a bunch of the other stuff as well as this setting, and to think that I can get like a bunch of your stuff with the Kickstarter is amazing. And I'll
Yeah,
put
thank you.
and I'll put links down below for the viewers if they want to check this all out and
I,
support the project.
I
And
appreciate it. Time is of the essence. We end
yeah.
on July 18th at noon Central.
And if you want more people to see this interview and find Bizarre Kingdoms, press the like button down below. It helps a lot in that regard. And
For sure.
I'm a little bit of a weirdo when I come to doing these interviews. I'm not sure why I do this, but I like talking about all your game, all about the game in the beginning. But I also like to talk about like, you as an author, as a
Sure.
developer, history wise. Like, how did you get into tabletop RPGs? Were you like,
My older brother introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons when I was 4 or 5, probably.
man?
Um, yeah, it was what they were doing, and I wanted to do it, and they were pissed about it. But I was a very good reader when I was a kid. Like I was, 2 years old, reading the road signs when we would drive back and forth between the town in Wisconsin where I was born and Rockford, where my dad is from. I started reading comics when I was 2, something like that. I was just a very advanced reader, so I could keep up. I could read what was on the sheet. I don't know that I understood what was going on, but I could read what was on the sheet. And my mom was our first GM because this was 83, 84, height of the Satanic Panic. So my mom thought that the best way to know what we were doing and what we were getting into was to just do it with us. And so she wound up running games for us for a couple of years. And then that kind of fell off. My brother got a Firebird and stopped playing D&D. And then I reignited my love of role playing games when I was 11 or 12. I got my hands on a copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. And I was a huge Turtles head. I loved the Turtles. And even at that age, again, owing to my older brother, I had read like the old Eastman and Laird comics. So like I had a different version, I had a different vision of the turtles in my head than like the cartoon. I thought the cartoon was fine, don't get me wrong, but like I also liked the black and white, bloody, will kill you turtles.
Yeah.
So that was fun, and I got that game and I loved it, and it just my gaming hobby went from there, and I was pretty much a hobbyist until whatever year the OGL came out, 2000, 99, 98.
Ooh.
And I had talked with a couple of buddies of mine about this setting that I had wanted to make. And I was big into the World of Darkness. So I wanted to make a setting that was somewhat similar in that it was modern horror, urban fantasy. That was going to be the drive. But my main idea for how it was going to function was everything was going to be based on this energy called contagion. The idea that like some monsters would get it by scaring people. Some
Okay.
monsters would get it by drinking their blood. Some monsters would get it by doing a ritual, so on and so forth. But that was what everybody was after because it's the power of the universe. It's that supernatural energon that binds everything together. And so me and my partners, Toy Caesar and Darius McCaskey, we formed Aegis Studios and we made Contagion First Edition using the OGL 3.5, which in hindsight, I mean, I'm glad we did it because that got us to do it. But it was a fucking terrible design decision. It wasn't good for the setting. And so that got me going and I did it. It was a part-time gig for me for a very long time. In fact, I started making movies in 2009, released my first movie in 2010. And
Yeah.
I only did like a handful of gaming products between 2010 to 2018. Because I was mostly making movies.
What got you into making it full time for or well, I guess
Oh, what got me into doing TTRPG full time?
yeah.
I got tired of getting my heart ripped out and shown to me while it was still beating every 18 months working in movies.
Um,
I and it's really been interesting too, like doing press and just talking to people. There are a lot of people who have dipped their toe into filmmaking that work in the tabletop industry, and we all have the fucking battle scars to show it. Like it's a horrible industry. And I can't, and we're just doing it at the indie level. I can't imagine how awful it is if like there's actual money involved.
oh
Um,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it just, yeah, the big one that was kind of a killer for me. I made a movie called Dry Spell. I don't think you can find it online right now. And if you can, probably shouldn't watch it. It was a romantic comedy, but it was like a mid 2010s romantic comedy. There's a lot of jokes in there that I don't stand by and I probably wouldn't make today.
Yeah.
Um, and I've thought about doing a director's cut to fix that a little bit, but there's also a lot of stuff in that I'm super fucking proud of that was good. We shot the movie in New York. I got to live in New York City for 3 weeks. We were running around shooting like crazy. It was awesome. It was my love letter to New York. I got to pay homage to Coming to America, which was a big thing that I wanted to do. I love that movie. A lot of fun stuff in Dry Spell. Everything was looking great. We funded the movie. We released it through an aggregator, which is basically like a service that like takes your content and rolls it out to the various streaming services and so on and so forth. And this was 2013, 2014. So the
Oh,
various streaming services were like four of them. But we were number two on iTunes the weekend we released for comedy. And then we were on Pirate Bay the next weekend, and then we never made a fucking penny after that.
oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah. And that was when I was like, I'm done doing movies. I had two more movies I made after that. No, one more movie. I had one or I'll have to look at my IMDb. I had one or two movies I made after that. But the last movie that I made, Reckoning, was self-financed. We really made it with the business model that like we're only going to distribute it to people who got it on Indiegogo, and everybody else can sit and spin.
Yeah.
Um, and we made our money to make it, and I got to bow out of that industry on my own terms, and I'm extremely proud of Reckoning. And I think you actually can find that one online, and if you can, you should watch it. If you can't, I'll go figure out a way to get it online.
Nice.
um
I can hardly imagine being in that industry and crazy what you had to deal with that.
it wasn't fun. Don't recommend it. Yeah, it's on Reckoning's on Prime. Go watch it.
Huh.
It's a $1.99 to rent. It is full disclosure, it's super fucking violent.
Yeah.
It's not for the kiddies. A dude gets his member nailed to a chair at one point in the movie.
Man,
Yeah.
that's crazy. It's interesting to see how streaming and self-publishing and things have changed so much of the game now, especially not just in movies but in
Oh yeah,
tabletop RPGs. Like
absolutely.
I could not have fathomed putting out my own tabletop RPG without having like sent a resume to some company or
Right.
somewhere.
Well, and it's funny too because like Aegis Studios, I think we were like the 30th or 40th company to sign up for RPG Now, which was a website that has been since consumed by Drive Through RPG.
Mm.
I'm not sure, but they may have launched before Drive Through RPG. Matt McElroy would be able to correct me on that, but they launched around the same time, if nothing else. And I always thought, you know, when we were first making Contagion First Edition, I
Mhm.
was I was like, what's this PDF nonsense? Nobody's going to use them. We need to get some print books and take them to conventions, so on and so forth. And much to his credit, my partner at the time, Darius McCaskey, was like, no, PDF is the future. We
Mhm.
are going to make money on this, I promise. And I was like, well, we'll see. And absolutely, Darius was right. So all credit to him for being that kind of a visionary, because he was like, no, we need to do PDF only books, man, because there's no overhead. I'm like, that's fucking silly. And then turned out it wasn't silly. And in fact, Darius and Toy both sort of sold me their chunk of the business, excuse me, and went about having families and whatnot. That's how I'm the sole proprietor of Aegis Studios now.
Looks like it's doing well for you. I hope this Kickstarter does well and that it leads to a lot more stuff for you in the future.
That's me too. I'm hoping. I have some pie in the sky goals about like what I would like to do next, but also I do stay busy freelancing. Like I said, Onyx Path keeps me hopping.
Oh yeah. Uh,
But
and so we're getting close to the end here.
sure,
What other projects are you currently working on that you can talk about?
freaking wonderful question. Okay, so I just turned in. I have a lot of streams going on for one thing.
Oh yeah.
Head over to twitch.tv/the Onyx Path. There's a bunch of stuff going on. I'm kicking off a new Exalted stream this Friday, which I'm super excited about. It's going to be Exalted Essence. We're doing it Friday, bi-weekly Friday mornings. My We just went into hiatus for my They Came from the Cyclops' Cave stream. I've never I think last Friday's game of that might be my favorite session I've ever run of a role-playing game. I laughed, I cried, I did my Skeletor voice. It was perfect. The One of the characters raised aloft their magic sword and said words, and it was a perfect moment. It was beautiful. But aside from the streaming stuff, I just turned in the manuscript for the Curious Cats of Mao Jumpstart, which was super cool to be able to work on. I'm excited and looking forward to that being out there. Someday, Hated and Feared will come out, and you'll never be able to get me to shut up about it again. It's a supplement for Aberrant, dealing with the Terrigen and hate groups and other outsiders who don't fit within any major allegiance. And that was a riot to work on. I'm a big fan of the Terrigen. I have a Terrigen. It's kind of hard to.
Oh,
It's in a weird spot to show people, but I have a Terrigen tattoo on my arm.
awesome.
It's really easy to see me. There we go.
Yeah, the
A Terrigen tattoo.
Null Manifesto.
Right, and I got to write the Null Manifesto actually, which was also super cool.
Nice.
There was like a one paragraph excerpt from it in the Aberrant first edition book, and then there have been like little lines from it here and there that have popped up throughout. But Ian and I sat down and we're like, let's have a full text. What did Mel say?
Where can I
And
find this text?
it's in the back of Terat, the novella that my wife and I co-wrote. There's an appendix that has the full text of it, but also it will be repeated in Hated and Feared.
Okay.
Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, it was a very interesting thing to write, because you're trying to write dialogue for somebody who is smarter than the human mind can conceive of someone
Mm,
being.
It's
You
tough.
know, but they're also trying to communicate. They're trying to dumb it down a little bit for the people who. So there was that, and I mean, and I'm not going to lie, I channeled a whole lot of Magneto scholarship into that document, because
Yeah.
there are some parallels between Divismal and Magneto.
Oh,
Just saying.
totally. Gotcha. And I think you also put out an indie game on Steam, the
Sure,
Chainmail.
yeah, I did. Sure did. Yeah, Chainmail Bikini. It's on. In fact, I think it's still on sale, the Steam sale right now. I think you can still get it for 99 cents. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'll get this video out in time, but hopefully people can check it out.
If not, it's $1.99 normally. And so, just so that you know what's going on when you go into it, my whole plan for Chainmail Bikini, I love like Legend of Zelda type JRPGs, like old school JRPGs, but I hate spending 60 hours playing a game. Like, it's the
Oh yeah.
biggest buzzkill. I never finish a game that's that long. So I was like, I want to make that game, but I want to make it 4 hours and you're done. So it's a very small, self-contained JRPG, you have a list of quests. You go bang out your quests, bang, you're done. Now, I may build expansions for that, as time goes on, build like a whole new quest chain. Who knows? I would like to see it out in the world and see people enjoying it before I think too hard about doing that. But it was a hoot to work on, and it's full of like the whole thing is kind of a piss take. Like there's, it's the chainmail bikini is a joke right up front.
Yeah.
The character that wears it is like, what is this supposed to protect me from? Exactly.
Nice.
And there's a lot of bits in it. The bit that I'm probably the most proud of, cover your ears if you plan on playing through the game. There's a point where you encounter a mimic, and the lead character just goes, "Oh fuck," and like it cuts off in the middle, and then you go into the fight. Because I'm easily amused.
Yeah.
So that shit was funny to me. A lot of the dialogue in it, I find hilarious.
And lastly, where can people find you?
I am at Travis Legge, Leggge, pretty much everywhere on the internet. The main difference is on Twitch, I am Plastic Age Plays. I think on YouTube, I might be Travis Legge Plastic Age. But like if you, not to sound like a pompous ass, but if you Google me, you'll probably find my stuff.
Yeah. I'll be sure to put the links in like a comment or the description.
Yeah, I
Sure
appreciate
people
it.
know where.
But yeah, I'm like Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter. I still don't call it X.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
Facebook. I'm all those places. So
Well, thank you so much for this interview. I thank you for coming to here so I can pick your brain and everything. It's
thank you
been
for having
wonderful
me.
talking to you.
Likewise, I greatly appreciate the platform. Thank you for having me and for helping me get the word out about Bizarre Kingdoms.
Yeah, no problem. And with that, please check out Bizarre Kingdoms Kickstarter ending soonish. July, you said
18th at
18th,
noon central. Noon central.
noon central. Check it out. And with that, I will stop the recording.